Getting stories from the edge where the healing begins.
Welcome to this week's edition of the Old Paratrooper podcast where we talk to a wide variety of guests from all walks of life, with ultimately the main goal of raising awareness for mental health among military veterans and emergency services communities, and as a whole, really. Today's guest, former professional footballer and manager, and more importantly, Nottingham Forest legend, Steve Chettle. How you doing, Steve? All right?
I'm very well, Chris. Thank you for the very kind introduction.
No dramas at all. This is a bit of a weird one for me. I've had a few footballers on. I had Razor Ruddock on a few months back, but obviously growing up watching you and supporting Forest, it's a bit of a bizarre thing because I had you on my bedroom wall, not just you on your own because that'd be a bit weird.
Yeah, that's a bit weird.
The rest of the team and stuff growing up through the 80s and 90s and that. So yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to come on.
My pleasure, mate.
Awesome stuff. Well, what I like to do with all the podcasts is I like to start at the beginning. Seems like a good place to start. Where you grew up, what you were like as a kid, and then kind of how you got into kind of football. So yeah, over to you, please.
Nottingham, born and bred. Probably went to football before I started playing football with my dad. I think my first game was second division, 1976. Stood in the Trent end on my dad's shoulders, watching Burnley playing the second division against Forest. So that was my first introduction to football itself, really. Just following my dad round. Used to watch him play on a Sunday afternoon on the local park. Didn't get to the heights that he probably wanted to, playing on Sunday afternoon in the Hangover League. But no, he really enjoyed his football. So I didn't start playing football until I was 9, to be fair, Chris, playing local school stuff. Bonington Junior Schools in Bulwell. Bulwell kid, lived on a council estate and basically grew up on the streets like most kids did, playing football every night, being shouted in for your dinner, came in when either somebody took the ball home or your tea was ready. It was like a normal background for me as a kid being brought up in the 70s.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it was. I'm an 80s kid, and it was the same sketch. You used to play football for like 6-7 hours in the school holidays and stuff, or on the street and wherever you could. Was you always a Forest fan?
I was always a Forest fan, but I was always interested in the team that won most stuff, which back then was probably Liverpool. End of the 70s, and then obviously Forest had their purple patch when they won 2 European Cups. So didn't get to watch the finals live. I was watching them on the TV at home with my parents. And then it came to, I was at Notts County as a kid from being 12, but I moved to Forest at 14 when the recruitment lead coach, Alan Hill, moved from Notts County to Forest. And I came across from Notts County to Forest when I was 14 with Alan. And I was training in the holidays with the first team at 14, which was a little bit scary, training with people who had won European Cups. But yeah, it was a great grounding, very humbling, and you had to grow up very, very quickly in those days because it wasn't as PC as it is now, shall we say.
Yeah, I'll come on to that later on. I wanted to kind of ask you a few questions about, the current game and stuff, but we'll come on to that. But no, I as I said to you off air, it's a bit of a weird one for me because I grew up watching kind of the Forest teams of the 80s and 90s. Massive Forest fan when I was growing up, and then I kind of drifted a little bit away from football. But it's definitely a weird one, but. So yeah, the academy and that. So you got in there at like 14 at Forest. Was that like through the kind of junior red stuff back then, as it was known?
Well, there wasn't an academy as such like there is now, which I'm involved with at Mansfield. You train twice a week at a local school at Padstow School at Southglade up in Bestwood Park, which in itself was 2 bus journeys to get there. We trained city boys. We trained across the Greenwood Meadows, which is another 2 bus journeys to get across there. So you became very self-reliant of getting from places from A to B and catching buses. And I didn't join Forest until it was 1985 when I went straight from school. So I left secondary school at 15, just going on 16, and went straight to Forest in 85. And obviously worked with the legend, which is Mr. Brian Clough, which was another great upbringing for me. Got taught a lot of great morals, a lot of respect, a lot of manners. Which I think everybody at the football club has tried to adhere to since that, especially from my era.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Brian Clough, again, grew up watching him, and he was a throwback, wasn't he? He was old school. I remember kind of seeing the famous clip you know, where there's some kind of football hooligan, not hooligans, but fans on the field, and he gives them a clip round the ear. So, I mean, he was definitely kind of an old school generation. So was that a bit like, I know, I'm sure you've been asked this like many times, but was it daunting when you first met him and like working under Brian Clough? Because I can imagine him being quite an imposing figure.
Very daunting. Obviously, straight from school, not great life skills, shall we say, at 16, just working and meeting Brian Clough for the first time. But he had this habit of making you just feel really comfortable. He knew everything about everybody. And I think Nigel has got some of his dad's skills now, where he treats people as people first and their footballers second. But you know, working alongside him, you used to hear the dog coming in before him in the morning. So if you heard the dog barking, you used to run and hide in the boot room so the gaffer didn't get you to walk the dog in the first place. But like I say, great morals, a great upbringing for me. And he was a manager. That's what he was, Chris, more than anything else. He didn't coach. He wasn't there all the time. He trusted people around him, Ron Fenton, Liam O'Kane, Archie Gemmell, to go and do their work. So he didn't coach a lot. He just managed and made people feel really good when they were having a rough time. And when people were thinking they'd cracked it, I remember Stuart Pearce was on the end of one of his tongue waggings one day because he'd had England call up, and the gaffer brought him back down to earth, said he shouldn't be in the England squad, he's not good enough. So yeah, he had this great skill of making you feel great at the right time and knocking you down a peg or two when you needed to at any other time.
Yeah, well, I suppose that's the thing, because I suppose, and again, growing up, I saw quite a few lads coming through school that had so much potential. They kind of went with the junior Reds kind of thing, with the Forest kind of, when you were younger, if you know, and had a lot of potential, and then got a bit above their station, if it were, got a bit cocky, discovered alcohol and girls, as you do at that age. So I suppose having someone like Brian Clough as a role model, would you say he was someone that, you know, definitely kept you very grounded and on the straight and narrow? It sounds like it.
Absolutely. That, you know, even when I was going out with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, he used to ring because we'd lived apart because we were living with our parents. So he used to ring up her house and see where I was sometimes at night. So just checking up on you and doing simple things like that just keeps you on your toes. Yeah, but I don't know. It was just norm for me. And, you know, people, I'd want to ask all these stories about Brian Clough. Brian Clough to me was the greatest mate that I've obviously worked under. Won trophies under Brian Clough as well. But he was a normal person, Chris. He made you feel great. You know, there's contract negotiations, which are stories that we've been involved with. There's me being injured and he's come round to my house and bought me Sky because I couldn't train for 6 weeks. So there's all those kind of things that people don't know about. But this was, like I'd say, the integrity of the guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, you just get to see him on television like me from a kind of supporter's perspective. But obviously, like you say, you knew him best. You know, you worked under him for a lot of years. I mean, you were at Forest from, was it 86 to about 99,
Yeah,
98?
85. I went from school. Got in the first team around about 87. Obviously, the gaffer left first year of the Premier League, which would have been 92, 93. And I left in 99. So I was there from being 16 until being 31. So quite a while. Obviously, I had the constant manager for the first part of my career, Brian Clough. And then afterwards, then Frank came in and took over the baton, and Frank did a fantastic job to get the club back to where it was and playing into Europe. And then it became a little bit messy after Dave Bassett. Big Ron came in, Stuart was manager, David Platt came in, and when Platt came in 99, 2000 season, I left in the November and went back to Dave Bassett at Barnsley on loan in the initial period.
Was that like a bit of I have read that as well. Was that like a mutual thing, or a disagreement, or was it just like,
No, it was told me I was never going to play again for him. So I thought, okay, fair enough. And at the time, I was bitter, shall we say, a lot. I was very bitter. Been there for 14 years. Just had a testimonial 2 years previous. I was club captain at the time. But David Platt had his own ideas, and in all honesty, Chris, it was probably the best thing for me at that time. I needed a new challenge. Went to Barnsley, like I said, in November, an initial period of 1 month loan. That season, we got to the playoff final, try and get to the Premiership, and Forest were kind of struggling a little bit. We lost in the final, fortunately, to Ipswich, so we didn't get back in the Premier League. But I had 2.5 really good years at Barnsley, and from there, played at Grimsby, played with the gaffer again at Burton. Had one final year in non-league with Ilkeston when I was 36, and I decided to hang my boots up then on my own accord. So I don't really miss playing, Chris, in all honesty. I miss the day-to-day, like you say, you're around with the lads every day, and a bit the camaraderie. And when we meet up in these reunions and things, it's just like you've never grown up. The stories that you tell and the experiences that you can speak about, will live with you forever. So the great memories to have.
Yeah, I think that's a lot in a lot of professions. I think the military's the same. You don't miss the military stuff because you get older, you get wiser, your perspective change, your goals change. But you do miss being around because I can imagine sort of some of the characters you had in the team back then as well. The banter, the practical jokes, and obviously I talk about quite a lot. Like we've gone through a series in the last 10 years, I'd say, unprecedented change in generational change with the way the world is. Wrongly or rightly, that's the way it is. But back then, I can imagine the practical jokes, the locker room banter and stuff was probably brutal, but also what a laugh it would have been. Is that right? Was that the case?
It was brutal being 16 and walking into a dressing room with Gary Birtles and Ian Bowie every morning. I was on tea duty for 2 years. I made tea for the first team for 2 years. And if the tea wasn't right in the morning, Christ almighty, Bomber used to kill you. So walking into that dressing room, getting their kit ready, making sure the boots are clean, making sure everything's packed for them. Life experiences that you can't really get taught unless you're right in the middle of it all. So yeah, it's something I'll always remember with great fondness. I try to be a bit more respectful to the kids now because they don't clean our boots and things like that. But we were toilet duty. I was painting the drying room sauna one day while it was on. Those jobs don't happen anymore. So everything else is done externally, where you were literally on the coalface every day, sweeping the stands, cleaning boots, putting the kit in the laundry, getting the stuff out in the morning. So you're a big part of the pros' day-to-day life as well, and they had to rely on you. So it was something you had to take great responsibility for.
Do you think that's a kind of bad thing that's gone away? Because I can only see that from my perspective, and I'm 45. I came through the military in the kind of late 90s, and there was that sort of thing. You almost had to earn a little bit of respect, and like I say, I suppose it's another way of grounding you. That you're polishing someone's boots, that you're sweeping the floor, and you've got a responsibility. You start off small with a responsibility, and then you kind of get more responsibility and stuff like that. Do you think that's perhaps missed a little bit in the current grade? Because I don't want to
think it is. I think it's kind of character building as such. If you want to accept that responsibility, some people didn't like it, in all honesty, and there's one story where one of our best players in the youth team, even though he's a great footballer, he couldn't take the day-to-day banter, if you want to call it, or the responsibilities that we had. He couldn't cope, and he stopped playing. Whereas I enjoyed all the muck and nettle stuff. I loved cleaning the boots. I enjoyed getting all the kit out for the players because you had this kind of one-on-one with the players for the first time, just speaking to them about what they needed. And at Christmas, they gave you a massive tip. So everyone's a winner at Christmas.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Well, again, I guess it's a sign of the times, and I don't know whether now like football's probably more of a business than it's ever been, and I suppose they kind of want to protect that. Kind of, if they see a good player, they want to protect that and everything else. So I kind of see it a little bit, but I just think for me, and not just in that perspective, like I say, in different careers and stuff, I feel like those sort of things we're kind of missing. It teaches people respect and stuff. Anyway, but that's a whole different topic. Going back to your playing career, obviously you played approximately about 500 games for Forest. Is that right? Premier League.
Yeah, 526, I think it is, but who's counting, eh?
Yeah, well, I did read that that's like, is that still like the third highest or second?
Third. Yeah,
Third.
third highest appearances altogether, and I think I'm still at the top of the all-time Premier League appearances for Forest, which is a strange one. And hopefully, if Forest do carry on as they are, somebody will stay there for a while and maybe get past that number. I don't know what the number is, honestly, Chris, but yeah, I'm very proud of that. Like I say, Nottingham kid. I think I'm only a few behind Ian Bowyer, who was second, but a long way behind Bob McKinley, who's right at the top of that echelon of players.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, that just probably shows, what the caliber of player you were to stay at a club, because it's kind of unusual nowadays for players to stay that length of time, and that's why that record will probably kind of withstand it for a long period of time, because that shows what a player you would have been to be kept on for like 13 years in one club and stuff, doesn't it?
Well, I really like, I always had this kind of imposter syndrome as such, because I was a local kid who played in the park, who went to watch Forest as a kid. I came through a local comprehensive school, and you're playing alongside Des Walker and Stuart Pearce and Nigel Clough and Steve Hodge. And I was lucky enough to get to the Under-21s team with England and going away with the lads, because we travelled together, because we're on the same journeys. The senior team played at the same fixtures as the Under-21, so we travelled away together. I had a lot of exposure to being around senior pros, and I think it made me grow up very quickly and appreciate what I did. But most years there was a new player came in. Colin Foster came in one year. Cole Tyler came in another year, and I had to scrap and fight for my place. But I must have been doing something right, because the manager picked me 500 odd times. So, like I said, I still had this kind of do I deserve to be in this team sometimes? I was always kind of a negative and worried about what was going to happen, as opposed to this super positive person that had this great positive outlook on the games. I was always nervous on what might happen, and that never left me until I finished playing. So even though a lot of appearances, a lot of nerves, a lot of apprehension, but like I say, I wouldn't swap it for anything in the world.
Yeah, but the imposter syndrome comes up a lot, and I think a lot of people, it's more common than people actually think. But I always, because I have the same thing, imposter syndrome, from time to time with the careers I've done. But I also think that it's probably better to be a little bit that way than be this overconfident, cocky, because then you just get brought down a peg or two. You get these people. I'm sure you've seen plenty through your kind of career, and probably through the coaching side of things as well, where people come in and they're overly confident, and then they don't make it, and then it's a whole new bag of worms, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you can look at it that way, that if everything goes well, it goes well. If you're expecting everything to go well and everything to be perfect, it's a very tight ship that you're going to have to run every day. There's that fine line between super confident and super arrogant. It's a very fine line, and I'd rather be that person that accepts what they can do, and know if everything goes well, it's great, but accept the times that sometimes it's not always going to be great. You just have to learn from those experiences as well. They're just as valuable as making sure you're fantastic every week, from learning the times that it's not so good.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose what I want to touch on is kind of the injury thing. Obviously, you've been injured. It's fairly unusual for professional footballers to get through their career without being injured. But how does being injured affect you? Because obviously, ultimately, you want to play football. That's what you want to do. It's your passion. When you're injured and you sat on them sidelines, how does that affect you kind of mentally, and how do you bounce back from a serious injury?
Uh, I'd class myself as very lucky. I haven't had a long-term injury where people have been out for 6 months, 9 months a season with cruciate ligaments injuries. I had a broken cheekbone, eye socket, and nose from a collision with Colin Hendry in 1990. I was out for 6 weeks with that. I've had a couple of dead legs. I've had probably a hamstring strain. So I've probably only missed 6 weeks in a spell, which has been my longest time. And that was when, like I say, when I broke my face. But I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy sitting on the side. I'm not a great watcher of football. I've learned how to watch football now being a coach, because you end up watching the game probably as an excited fan in the first place when you first start playing. Then you learn to accept that you're not a fan anymore. It's your job. So you're missing out on the fun part of the week, which is the game time. Even though I said I find myself being kind of nervous, the fun time is the game time of going out and playing in front of 20, 30. I missed out on the League Cup final in 1992 with a slight injury, so I didn't play in that, which would have been against Manchester United, where we lost 1-0. So yeah, I kind of been myself fortunate, but now I'm on the other side of this, where we're having to stay positive with kids who have had long-term injuries. We've had 2 kids this year who've had 2 operations on ACLs. One kid's had a torn hamstring. And now I've seen the other side of this where we're now having to look after players. And these are young men, 16, 17, trying to make a career in football at that stage in their life where decision making, whether they get contracts or not for the next part, like you're speaking about in their transition and fire service and things like that. And we have to look after these kids because these kids are, they're not as sturdy, shall we say, as we were and the way that we were brought up. And we have to make sure that we are looking after them to our best capacity.
Yeah, it's difficult because obviously being, and I'm sure you were the same, you plough everything into your football career with the expectation and kind of that it's going to work. That's fine. It's your dream, it's your goal. And then sometimes it doesn't. And then you may have kind of not studied through school because you're thinking, right, it doesn't matter because I'm going to be a footballer. Then all of a sudden, 18, 19, or sometimes younger, you're sort of almost thrown on the scrap heap. And it's good that you're now, I think a lot of clubs are looking at that. And like I say, we've just had one of your players, obviously I won't mention any names, come to the fire station with a look at a future changing career down the line. So yeah, I think that's definitely a good thing because obviously that can bring its own mental health in itself when your dreams are crushed by injury or you just, you're not making the grade, so to speak, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And like I say, I think the number is astonishing. I think it's 0.25 of players who come through systems to make professional careers. So if you look at the numbers that play football, the people who get to this tiny little 0.2% of the top Premier League footballers, the fallout's huge. And we have to make sure that they are now leaving us with an education. They're leaving us with some kind of interpersonal skills. They're employable, which is the most important job for us because if you're a footballer, fantastic, but there's so many people who just need to get through the rest of their life for their next stage of whatever they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely a good thing and probably something that kind of needed to change. But back to your playing career. Now, I want to ask about your highs and lows because obviously you've got the League Cup win in 1990, and then you've got obviously the Tottenham FA Cup final, which I watched. Was that 1991?
91, yeah, 91.
91. I was 11 years of age. I remember watching that and being devastated. And obviously, you were in the team and stuff. So how did you take that against Tottenham?
Well, so I got to we this year is 35 years, Chris, since we won the League Cup, which is astonishing. Yeah, so 1990 when Nigel Jameson scored the goal that won that game against Oldham. The year before we beat Luton in the same Littlewoods Cup, which is the League Cup, where Nigel Clough scored two. Year after was the 91 Cup final, which was what they call the Gascoigne Cup final. Even though he lasted 5 minutes, he should have been sent off after two. Uh, he was absolutely wired in the tunnel. I was in the under-21s team with Gaza. Gaza is a super footballer, but super emotional, super excitable. And I think the cup final was at that time the pinnacle of what he'd achieved in football. Overexcited, yes. Nearly decapitated Gary Parker after 2 minutes. Did himself and did Gary Charles after 10 minutes, and Pearson scores a free kick. And he should have been sent off. We still to this day, when we speak about it, the referee should have sent him off after the first one. Definitely should have sent him off after the second one. And then we got to extra time. Norm saves Gary Lineker's penalty at the cup final. We get to extra time. Unfortunately, Des scores the own goal, and that would have been the cherry on the icing of the cake for Brian Clough. I think winning the FA Cup, and it would have been the whole set for him.
Yeah, what a shame. And like I say, 2-1, it's so close as well. And like I say, I remember being the ups and downs of watching it as a kid at the time. I was like, oh, yeah, it's one of them, isn't it? But you can all look back in hindsight about this and that and just the way it was. It's fate almost at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. It wasn't nice. Like I say, that's the only cup final I've got to. And hopefully Forest can replicate that this year. They've got a good chance on Saturday to get to the semi-finals. But I think the year after was probably the hardest one to take for us, the relegation from the Premier League. That was a low point. That was a low point. The manager wasn't in great health. The team lacked in confidence. The game had kind of changed. Arsene Wenger had come in. Foreign managers have started to come in. Foreign players have started to come in. And they changed the way that they played the game, thought about the game, prepared for the game. and we were kind of still doing what we were doing before because we were successful at it. And in the end, we weren't good enough to stay in the league, and it took obviously the manager stepping down and the new manager coming in and trying to change everything over. And like I said before, I thought Frank did a fantastic job, and he's probably underrated really for what he achieved with that group that had been relegated and got us back up with the signings that he made.
Yeah, what were the kind of, obviously the way Frank managed the team compared to Brian? Was there massive differences in personalities? I kind of almost know the answer from the outside, but yeah, were there big differences between the two?
Yeah, I don't think anybody can try and be Brian Clough. Frank came in, and Frank had to be himself, and Frank knew the history of the club. He knew the morals of the club and what we wanted to do. We needed to be a city club, shall we say. We needed the fans to be on board again because the year previous was horrible for everybody. Being a fan and knowing people who lived in the city and were fans, it was a poor year for us. And just to get the confidence back in the city, winning games and getting promotion straight back into the Premier League. And that year finishing third in the Premier League. Can it happen again? Fingers crossed this season would be great. But there wasn't the option of Champions League back in the day. There was just that UEFA Cup spot that we qualified for. Had a great run in that and enjoyed it. But if Forest can finish in the top three this year, Champions League football coming to the City Ground, wow, that'll be unbelievable.
Yeah, it's amazing to watch. I mean, and people take the mickey out of me a little bit because I'm not a massive kind of supporter of. I was when I was a kid, and then I moved away from it. And then, obviously, when they were going through the kind of the downturn when they weren't in the Premiership, I wasn't really following it. And now they're back up. I am, and people are like, "Oh, you're glory hunting now because they're back." But they've been playing some amazing football, and it's hard not to watch. I'm never one for sitting watching, Forest games or any kind of football. I don't really watch any of the internationals as such, but I've started watching quite regular now Forest on a Saturday and whatnot. And you know what? I think they're playing some unbelievable football, and I'm back in the zones of being like a proper Forest fan again. So it's good from that perspective.
It is. They've kind of shown some stability for the first time in a long time. Obviously, Steve Cooper came in, got them promoted, which was a fantastic achievement for how long they've been in the Championship. But even then, there was still some people questioning the style of play, the number of players that came in. Are these the right players? But I think since the new manager's come in, they've been stable. They've made a great purchase in the goalkeeper. The goalkeeper's been a fantastic purchase for them. The back four have been steady. Morgan Gibbs White obviously got his deserved England call up, and we've got Chris Wood, who couldn't score goals before, but now playing to his strength with the two speedsters on the outside. So it's good to watch again, and people that I know are enjoying watching it. But like you said, the game's changed a little bit. We can't get down to watch the games anymore. We don't get invited back. I've done a couple of hospitality gigs down there, but it's a business. It's a business. The place is now hospitality everywhere. It's a great looking ground again. But I don't know how many of the original supporters can now afford to go and do the football on 3 times a week, Chris, because it's a business and it's flaming expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that brings me on to what I was going to say about the differences between the game. And that was a little bit why I went against watching it because of all because back in the day, watching you guys play football in the 80s and 90s, it was a full contact sport. And I think for me, whether I have a violent nature or not, is that I like the full contact stuff. I like the hard men of football and the challenges and the kind of rough and tumble of it all. But we moved really far away from that. Where it's now you can't, obviously better than anyone when with what you're doing now. It's a non-contact sport, and I find it sometimes very frustrating to watch. So I suppose, what are your thoughts on the change of the game? Do you think that's been for the better or the?
If I was playing now, Chris, I'd probably be suspended 4 or 5 times a season, shall we say. I got sent off 4 times in my career. But like I say, I think they've tried to change the game and make it more of a spectacle. They've tried to get families involved more. Before it was very much a working class man. We'll go down the pub, we'll go to watch football, we'll go back to the pub, we'll watch it again a match of the day, and everybody has their own opinions on it. Now we have VAR, rightly or wrongly. Has it made the game better? I'm not so sure. It stops the talking in the pub, I think. But I like the game. I like the modern game. I've had to grow to like the modern game because of what I'm doing at the moment. Uh, I think the best players would still be able to play in the leagues that we played in. But the pitches now are so much better. The grounds they play in are so much better. The money they earn is so much better. But hey, I'm not a bitter man at all.
Well, that leads me on actually, because I was going to ask, and I remember, I won't mention any names, but I remember once working on a building site briefly from working in the Middle East back in the UK in Nottingham. And the driver that drove for Howdens was actually a player that played for the 79 and 80 cup winning Forest team. And I just thought that just goes to show the level and the money that's now in it. That once you retired from football back then, some people went and got normal everyday jobs. Certainly, this guy drove for Howdens, and like I say, he's quite a famous Forest footballer. But yeah, nowadays you couldn't dream of someone like one of these top flight going into a normal job after, because the money's just ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, I think anybody that now plays in the Premier League, they're set for life if they get themselves one kind of decent deal of a 3 or 4 year contract. I've known kids who are playing at Premier League clubs who are only 18 or earning extortionate amounts of money. Is it real? No, I don't think it's real. I don't know how much it helps the players unless they've got some really sound advice behind them or they've got some good grounding by their family. But it's not their fault, Chris. It's the way that the game's set up now with the Premier League. Like you said, I know players who have had to sell medals just to survive. They didn't even have pensions back in the day. We were put into a PFA pension when I first started playing, so I have the option of a pension as well. But I'm still working. I choose to work. I stopped playing at 36 and had 6 months off. And after 6 months, I was bored. So I had to find something else to do. And I went into coaching for the first time. If I was playing back in the Premier, if I was making 500 odd appearances in the Premier League now, would I have to work again? No, I wouldn't. But would I be happy? I don't know because I've not had that option.
Yeah, I know you say you got bored and you went to work, but I mean, if you've got 50 million in the bank, I mean, that could ease the boredom, I suspect.
Yeah, it gives you a bit more time to decide what you want to do, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, plenty of golf holidays, doesn't it? You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, I went away in the first year when I stopped playing. I went away at Christmas for the first time because I'd never known a Christmas or a New Year off, and it was kind of weird. Went away with the family, get some sunshine in Tenerife. The first year I packed in. Went away again in the summer, but the following, like I say, after the summer, I needed to do something, and I got into coaching because one of my kids was playing. So, and that's been my career path since then.
yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I wanted to talk about like the transition, because obviously playing for a top flight club like Forest, and then moving down as your career kind of progresses and as you age. How does that? Because I don't think I've ever heard anyone kind of really mention how that affects. Do you see that as like inevitability, or is it? Do you still play to the same, or do you get a little bit disappointed? Because obviously, I think everyone's concerned about age. But obviously it's more prevalent in certain jobs. And obviously at 36, when you stop playing it, is no age. But obviously for a professional sports person, it is, isn't it? So how did that affect you moving down the clubs and, as you
Well, I
went?
think the transition of training it got better as I got older. When I came in '85 and when the gaffer left in '92, '93, we didn't really train much. There was no strength and conditioning program. We had one single physio. The first team coach was the guy that ran on with a bucket and sponge. What's that supposed to do when you're injured? Oh, I've never known. But that was the transition. So when Frank came in, he brought a fitness coach in '93, a guy called Pete Edwards, and Pete Edwards was astounded how unfit we were as a football club. So then we had strength and conditioning, we had a fitness coach, we had dietitians come in. And when I left Forest in '99, for the first time, I had a real good gym program, and I was probably my fittest from 31 to 33. After that, I had a recurring back problem. I missed some games at least 2 or 3 times a year from this back problem. And then when you go into non-league, there isn't that there anymore. You go into non-league, and I had 1 year at Ilkeston, and I used to turn up on a Tuesday night, and there was 4 or 5 people there. I went, "Where the hell is everybody?" He went, "They've got jobs." So you have to accept. Yeah, so there's that as well. So you're coming from a real professional background into the semi-professional background, and you try and give your advice and all your experiences onto these players, but these players just want to play football. They've been at work all flaming day. So yeah, you have to accept where you are in your life. And like I say, I was going down each year. I went from Championship. I went to play then in the conference with Nigel Clough at Burton Albion. I had 1 year playing Northern Premier League with Ilkeston, and then I stopped. I had a couple of games playing vets, but that annoyed me because I didn't always win. So I just stopped. It was easier to stop and concentrate on. We had a young family and everything, so concentrate on being a dad and a husband and everything else.
Yeah. Do you still do any now? Do you still have a kickabout or anything? Or?
No, I don't. No, I even tried walking football, Chris, and that annoyed me because I was super serious about it. I wanted to win every game. I wasn't always winning, so I played it with Gemmo, and Gemmo's exactly the same, but Gemmo's still playing. Yeah, we were a couple of angry old men playing walking football. So I do a lot of walking now. I can't do a lot else due to my back still not being great. So can't join in with the kids. The kids are too quick now. All the kids that we coach, they're all too quick. They're all too good. So I stand there with my whistle and point and shout. I'm quite good at that now.
Yeah, that's your forte, is it? But no, it is one of them, and it's shit getting old. And I suspect even more so when you've been at the level of kind of your level of football. And then, I find it now. I'm 45, and I was obviously in the military. I used to be really fit, and I can't do what I could do 10 years ago. My lad plays for a local team. He's 15, and you know what? I tried to chase after the ball with him the other day, and he just left me for dust. And I nearly tore my hamstring again. I've done that a couple of times. So yeah, it's one of them. I feel your pain there, but I suppose moving on towards the kind of end of your career and stuff, was it going to be a natural progression into management, or was that something where the doors open and you thought, you know what, I can probably see myself doing that?
No, I didn't want anything to do with football the day that I packed in. I was a selfish player, and when the coach put on sessions that weren't directed straight at me, I thought they were a waste of time. So I didn't really know what it entailed being a coach. And my son joined Forest when he was 10 and joined the academy at 10. So I wasn't doing anything. I used to take him down to watch the sessions in the evening. And while I was stood there, I thought, I didn't really agree with what the coach was doing, for one. And I thought, secondly, why can't I do this? Why can't I give something back from all of these experiences that I've got? So I spoke to somebody, and obviously I've played there 14 years. I think, right, there'll just be a straight in for me. I said, how do I get involved in this? Says you have to go and take all your qualifications. So even though you've played, oh crikey, so from 17 finished at 36, a long time, you still have to go away and get qualifications. So went away and got qualifications through the FA, came back and started with the under-10s at Forest, right the way through to the under-21s at Forest. And I left Forest in 2013 and went into non-league management for a long time before I came back to Notts County. And now obviously I'm now doing Mansfield's youth team and reserves with him at Parland. So I'm enjoying it now. I've grown into it. Again, I didn't really know what I was doing in the first place, but being around good people and getting all these qualifications has now let me pass on my experiences to these players who want to be where I was, all this long time ago. So I think it's worked pretty well. And I think you have no entitlement being a player to being a good coach. You have to work at it, just like any walk of life. There's no entitlement. If you can't get across your message clearly to the kids and you've not got this bond with the kids, it's not going to work. No matter who you were or who you are, you have to be good at your job.
No, absolutely. I think we've seen it multiple times throughout sort of the last 20 years, absolutely outstanding players that go into management and then they crash and burn. And it's not just how good you were as a player. It's obviously your man management, how you manage people, kind of how you come across. And, I've seen it in various professions throughout my career. Excellent people at a certain level, but should never be in charge of paperclips. And that's probably the same kind of thing. You've got to be a people person and understand, and all that experience is not necessarily a given, is it?
No, I think you can learn from everybody really in a way, Chris. Even the things that you've looked at, said, "Croc, I'd never do that." So you're still learning from a really bad experience. One manager who let me go, I didn't get on with. He wasn't a great manager. He was a hell of a player and one hell of a coach, but his player personnel into skills were terrible. So you take it from that right, you can't treat people like that or expect to get buy-in from everybody if you're going to be like that with people. So you have to look at everything. You take a little bit of all these people and try and mold them together and bring your character out just to try and be yourself, because there's no point trying to copy anybody. There's no point me trying to be Brian Clough. The mold is broken the day that man managed. So you just got to take some of his, like I say, his personal traits, how he treats people and how he made other people feel, and bring it into, your kind of character.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. And I like I like the way that you said that. It's definitely a good way of looking at it. And like you've touched on, you're the kind of professional phase development for Mansfield Town. Obviously, I kind of work local to that in the profession I do now. How are you finding that? Are you enjoying that kind of where you're at? Because obviously you're like under 18s, is that right? Bringing up the
So we work with the kids who have left school. They come into an education football based program. It's 50-50. These kids have to leave after 2 years with an education. They have to get their qualifications. If they don't get their English and maths, they have to stay and do their English and maths first. So that's the priority. But these kids want to be footballers. But like I said, the numbers are very, very low. We've got to make sure these kids are equipped for the rest of their life. So I've been doing that for 2 years. I'm now at that stage in my life, Chris, where I don't want to start trampling over anybody. I'm quite happy in this environment that we're in, passing on my knowledge and my values to these players, and I'm very content. I work with a great team. Funnily enough, the guy that is my academy manager used to clean my boots when I was a pro, and he was a scholar. So he's now gone completely 360. Richard Cooper, my boss is called, and now he's my boss. He used to be my boot boy. So working with people that I've known before, it's a community-based club, and obviously you, myself, working in Mansfield, you know what it's like. Everybody loves the Stags. Everybody wants to make sure that they're doing well, and we need to make sure that RH Academy up at Plesley works just the same. There's a community background. We've got community rooms. Everybody knows everybody, and I think the gaffer Nigel, is the main point in all this. That he's like his dad. Everybody needs to know what everybody else is doing, because that's how you make a happy ship.
Yeah, absolutely, pal. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. Sounds like you're doing amazing things. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you, Steve. Thank you very much for making the time.
My pleasure, mate. Thank you for your time.
Hit the ground, no sound but the wind jumped out the sky where the real work begins. Iraq heat, cold steel on the front line, security tight, walking edge of a landmine. Somali seas, deck slick with the salt, eyes sharp, never blink, never halt. Surveillance in the mist, eyes on the prize. UK streets to foreign skies, from fire calls to bare knuckle rings, still fighting demons that memory brings. Oh, Kevin, tune in now, feel the truth get louder. This is the old paratrooper, no powder, no script, no mask, no lies, just facts. Mental health raw in boots or slacks, ADHD to the PTS pain. We're breaking silence, not playing games. Old paratrooper podcast, stay locked in. Stories from the edge where the healing begins. Not a saint, just a voice for the ones who never had a fucking choice. From the wire to the ward, from smoke to the dark, every scar on the soul is a battle mark. Memories haunting, can't shake the past, but together we fight, we stand steadfast. Loud engines roar, feel the thunder, every story shared we tear asunder.